What's up, everyone? We're back for post-game Locked On Bucks. Milwaukee take down the Nets. The big game Bucks, Frank. They win another national TV game. Giannis had another big night. It was fun. There's been a couple of rough games, so it was fun to see Giannis back out on the floor. Some strange lineups. We'll get to this in a little bit. And the thing was the fact that Darvin Ham picked up his first win. He was pretty excited about this after the game. There's a cool social media video. So we're going to break it all down on post-game Locked On Bucks starting right now.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane. You can hear me on this show daily. Frank describes me in different ways, as those who follow me on Twitter might see. You can jump on there and see that. But Frank is joining me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast for today's episode that is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out prizepicks.com. Use the promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize is daily fantasy made easy. We always thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day. And even though it's a weekend pod, people will be waking up, if you're a Bucks fan, feeling pretty happy. They beat the Nets 109. It wasn't really that close. Steve Nash took his starters out of the game with 6 minutes to go. But if we're going to do a weekend pod, if you want to know how this is worked out on Locked On Bucks for weekend pods, if it's a big game, if Giannis plays really well, you can almost guarantee there's going to be a podcast. That's pretty much how it goes. You reached out to me with, let's say, was it halfway through the fourth quarter? You sent me a little GIF and I was like, okay, we're in business.
Honestly, I thought I had responded to your question from earlier in the day.
No.
I was one of those things where I thought I had said yes, I could do it because whatever, I'm a washed up dad during a pandemic. So what am I doing on Friday nights, right? So yeah, I intended to pod with you regardless, but obviously after the last two games in particular, I would say this was a more fun game than the last couple of games. But not to say it was not weird and as you were alluding to, strange on a number of levels. And I mean, we were talking about just before the game. I mean, in a game where the Bucks had basically no guards, I would not have expected that they would outscore the Nets by 30 from 3-point line and be outscored by 20 in the paint. They were, I mean, again, I think probably obviously a lot of this happened while the Bucks were in command of the game. So it didn't really feel like as big a deal because the Bucks were not really, under threat for pretty much most of the second half. But the Nets scored 62 paint points tonight, which did not feel like that. They had 14 offensive rebounds. So they got after on the glass and it's just weird. Like we were kind of saying, like it didn't really feel like a game where that was happening so much. And, I think just in general, though, was this a statement win? No, I don't. I mean, the lineups are just too weird, I think, just across the league in some ways.
Come on, Frank. Give him a statement win. It's Mike Breen. It's national TV. It's Friday night. It's the Nets. James Harden in the pregame package said that he wants to win this game.
It was a really impressive win.
Okay.
I don't think it I don't think it says like, oh, the Bucks, are gonna cruise if these teams meet in the playoffs. But I mean, the nice part about tonight was the Bucks had, even though Kyrie Irving was missing this game because he refuses to get a vaccine, overall the Bucks were still in much worse shape in terms of COVID and other absences. And kind of as we alluded to, I mean, the list of guys that couldn't play felt longer than the list of guys that could. And ultimately the Bucks played a ton of dudes because they have signed Luke Cornett and what's Downton's first name? Jeff Downton, someone who I'd never heard of before today as a COVID hardship signing. Langston Galloway played 20 minutes tonight. He was playing for the Nets last week. And now he's playing for the Bucks. And he had 4 assists in 20 minutes. So just a really weird game. But, at the end of the day, the Bucks had a Giannis, 31 points on 17 shots, 9 assists. They had a Bobby Portis, 20 points in the first half, 25 for the game, 12 rebounds. He was a game high plus 27. And, you look at the starting five. Chris Middleton, slow first half, finishes with 26 and 5, basically got to his averages. Really big third quarter as the Bucks blew open their lead. And then I think just big credit to Jordan Nwora and Wes Matthews as the guys stepping up off the bench to give them minutes as starters tonight. And I didn't think you wanted to look much further than that. It got pretty scary at times with some of those bench units, especially in the second quarter, which we can talk about when Giannis gets the foul trouble. But I think both Nwora and especially Wes Matthews taking the responsibility of guarding Kevin Durant tonight. Again, KD was very good as he always is, but it was not easy for him. And Wes Matthews, 12 points on 9 shots. I mean, you take that every day. So, ironically, we were talking the other day about, well, have the Bucks had an impressive win this year outside of opening night against the Nets? And I think now the answer is yes, because now they have another win against the Nets, and they certainly were very shorthanded tonight, and it did not stop them from really controlling this game from the opening tip.
In the opener, I mentioned Darvin Ham, and I think it is important. This is something that we overlook. We talk about all the players that are out of the lineup, but obviously Mike Budenholzer wasn't there. Charles Lee wasn't there tonight. Blaine Mueller, an assistant coach, has been out in the protocols. Patrick St. Andrews. So this is the other part that never really gets reported on. But the Bucks coaching staff, like many around the league, but the Bucks coaching staff in recent weeks has been absolutely decimated as well, and they definitely noted that after the game. But yeah, I said in our group DM that I thought Javonte Smart was going to start. He played 3 minutes, so I was a little bit wrong on that one. And I guess looking at it, you can say, well, they didn't really need guard out there when you've got Chris, you've got Giannis. We've got used to them going to saying, well, let's just run Chris Middleton, Giannis pick and roll in fourth quarters of games. Well, they did it from the start in this one. And Giannis, if it wasn't for foul trouble, which by the way, all those fouls were probably pretty questionable, and maybe to say there was maybe a silly unnecessary fouls that Giannis picked up 11 minutes in the first half. But maybe the biggest takeaway from this game for me is the fact that when I'm looking at Brooklyn, they didn't have an answer for Giannis last year, albeit Blake Griffin actually did a pretty respectable job defending him. Griffin's looked absolutely washed so far this season, and they haven't added anyone else any chance of slowing him down in any capacity, which to me, that's probably going to add Kyrie Irving. They're going to have the star power, but do they have anyone that's going to slow down Giannis in any way? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Nets, give them credit, right? I mean, the question last year was, could they defend at all, slash at a high enough level to be competitive? Right now, I'm just looking at the NBA.com defensive rankings. They're 14th, but they're only 0.3 points per 100 behind the Bucks, who are 9th, and the Bucks are only 0.2 points per 100 behind the Jazz, who are 6th. So from 6 to 14 is a half a point per 100 possessions in terms of defensive points allowed. So, we saw it during that playoff series. I mean, I thought the Nets held up very well defensively. Maybe some of that was sort of self-inflicted from the Bucks side, but certainly in terms of slowing down Giannis, he will look very much at ease tonight. You mentioned the pick and roll. Again, Nick Claxton came alive a little bit on the offensive end as a roll man in the fourth quarter, but for the most part, it's just really hard physically to compete with Giannis. And tonight, we saw a lot of Cam Thomas. Steve Nash just experiments a ton during the regular season. I mean, we saw last year, like DeAndre Jordan was the guy defending Giannis basically throughout the regular season, and then he didn't play at all in the playoffs. We've seen him kind of do random stuff. We barely saw Bruce Brown in the regular season last year against the Bucks. We barely saw him tonight, although I thought when he came in, again, the Bucks had a big lead at that point, but he was pressuring Chris Middleton and basically making Chris's life a lot less comfortable, just as he did during the playoffs last year when he was the guy that started a number of games and was able to put some pressure on Chris and make Chris's job harder. But again, Bruce Brown then brings compromises on the other side. So, even when the Nets are healthy, it's been kind of random in the regular season, like who they're going to play against the Bucks and how they're going to try to stop Giannis. But the only constant has been that they haven't been able to stop Giannis, really, aside from game 2 of the playoffs last year when kind of everything went wrong. It's been just a guaranteed 30 plus every night for Giannis. And tonight, 31 on 17 shots. He had a couple threes. And to do it in just 27 minutes, mainly due to the foul trouble, again, they just don't really seem to have an answer for him. And I thought it was interesting as well. You try to play Claxton, put Claxton on Giannis to at least put a big sort of athletic guy out there against him. But especially in the first half, the Bucks with Bobby Portis, they're blitzing those pick and rolls with James Harden. They had a harder time getting the ball really like deep to Claxton, and because of the way the Bucks are playing, Harden wasn't just driving into the paint on pick and rolls. He wasn't able to throw alley-oops to Claxton. And so Nick Claxton, if he catches the ball at 17 feet out, it's very different than if he catches it at 7 feet or 8 feet, or if he's able to just go up for an alley-oop. He got going a little bit in the fourth quarter there, but the Bucks just sort of never let the Nets really play with a lot of pace. And meanwhile, Giannis had, I'm just thinking of that one play he had where he basically went two dribbles and 75 feet and kind of ball faked James Harden away and was able to get a driving layup. I think that put them up over 20 in the third quarter. So again, Giannis pretty much every game since he's returned, I think he's been above 30 points. I think maybe the one game, I think it was one game he had 28 points a week ago in one of the wins. But
ridiculous.
But yeah, he's just playing at an extremely high level. It was nice to see a couple of threes go down tonight, and the passing. Let's talk about the passing a little bit. We always sort of take it for granted, but especially he had a couple plays, and especially in the fourth quarter tonight, drives baseline, is like going way out of bounds, is able to get the ball to Jordan Wara. I mentioned his spot up shooting this year has been much improved. Came into this game at 42% on spot up threes. He had a big one again, the Bucks were up like 12, I think, at the time or so. But he hit a contested corner three off a really nice Giannis find to kind of, again, keep the Nets at arm's reach. And then the whip underhand pass from Giannis cross court to Bobby Portis in the corner for a three that I think got the lead back up to 20 in the fourth after the Nets have been showing some life. This is a pretty fun game. And, again, 9 assists from Giannis. He was dealing again. And, by the way he reacted to Bobby's three, he likes to show off. I don't know if I want to say he was assist hunting, Kane, but he definitely likes reminding people that he can pass. And tonight, he kind of was able to show the full arsenal offensively.
Add this game, but something about that pass particular that was really interesting that I thought from the post game, but only 26 minutes, and so he probably would have ended up with that triple-double normal game, and he had to play the 30-plus minutes that he sort of averages on a nightly basis. So it's a shame. The Bucks foul trouble plus the Bucks just blowing out Brooklyn cost him a triple-double. I'm not that disappointed about it, but you wouldn't have been that disappointed about it if you had Giannis in Prize Picks, the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. He was racking up the stats, and Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator, and offers all the superstars like Giannis, as well as the players that only record a handful of minutes, but provide valuable contributions. Like the Bucks tonight, Rodney Hood. I don't know what the prop was for him, but he's been starting to find a rhythm. All use it and use the promo code NBA will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to. So keep that in mind. Just go to prizepicks.com, use the promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. But that's not all we got going today. Shopify, I tell you, Shopify entrepreneurs, the resources once reserved for big businesses. So upstart startups and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online, in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. Believe me, this podcast started out selling, I don't know what honestly, I don't have the figures, but all I can say is booming, this podcast right now compared to where it was, Frank. But by the way, you get the credit for it. You were sitting right there. I'm not talking you down. It's got nothing to do with me. This is just the booming business that is Locked On Bucks. And like this podcast, Shopify power per sale to full scale. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is Possibility powered by Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA. That's all lowercase for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA. That's Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA. So this pass that you taunted to Bobby Portis, Giannis is going down the court. He's fist pumping, giving it to the crowd a little bit. Almost reminded me of him celebrating after, during game 6 of winning the title. And it's like, well, it's only January, but I'm still into it. But after the game, Eric Nail, of his great friend, you were looking a little bit like Jokic out there, and then he started answering his. And I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like Giannis might have been a bit annoyed that he said he was looking like Jokic. He was probably in his head thinking, no, I'm looking like Giannis. I can pull off this pass. I've done this before. But the pure power of that pass, when I was watching this, and Giannis actually really thrown a pass like that to Bobby, but he's confident as a guy that he has flicked those passes to because he can sort of handle it. But I was definitely sitting there thinking, I reckon I don't think my hands would be up fast enough. My head would be in the 20th row. That had some zip on it.
Yeah, and it was right in the shooting pocket, right? I mean, I think, I mean, the way Giannis passes, he's often, especially the way the Bucks spread the floor. Like I think from early stages of Bud, it's kind of about him getting to know like where people would be, and a lot of times he's throwing kind of more to spots than throwing to the guy that he's seeing. And so as a result, like he's not always the most accurate passer, when he's kind of making those dishes. But that one, he didn't jump up in the air and then have to make that adjustment, right? Like the War of 3 in the fourth quarter I mentioned, that's like a really improvisational type play. It's really hard to make a great pass there. But that Bobby pass, I mean, to do it the way he did it, I don't know how good of a bowler Giannis is. But to whip it the way he did, it was just really impressive. And I mean, one fluid motion, Bobby catch up, down. Bobby was enjoying that one as well. And a nice reminder, Bobby had the huge first half, for him to then kind of keep it going there and have a nice little punctuation mark at the end was fun, even though Giannis and Chris were doing most of the work in the second half.
I think that pass, let's just remember, made that pass. I think that pass would have sent a shiver down James Harden's spine because it was only a few years flick us.
I had the exact same thought. Like it was a little more like up. If people are watching this on YouTube, I'm like doing it like it was like under versus up, but I had the exact same thought because it was from that side of the floor. He was much higher on the floor tonight when he did it versus he was in the post when he pegged James Harden in the head in Houston a couple years back. But yeah, I had the same exact thought. It was like a similar type of motion, like almost like a highlight stick, like or whatever a highlight thing is called. He really whipped it.
I got to go back and watch the replay and see if Harden was even on the floor. I can't remember right now, but if he was in proximity, his life definitely flashed before his eyes. And one other thing on the Nets, I am just going to make this point very quickly. Had a bit of an off night tonight, which has been rare. Some big nights, and I blame
he was due to not go like 8 for 8. It was about time. Patty owed us that game. Thank you, Kane.
Well, I think that's right. He was 1 for 8 out of the starting lineup, in the starting lineup, out of the starting lineup. Kyrie Irving might be a fantastic player, but he's broken Patty Mills' rhythm. Pretty disappointing for everyone that enjoys Patty Mills. Wes Matthews, you brought him up, and they guaranteed his contract today, so that was the news. I don't think it's a big surprise. We spent a lot of time talking about Boogie Cousins the other day, which it didn't work out that way. But Wes Matthews tonight,
news, quote unquote news, right? Like it was a shock.
Yeah, exactly. But you saw the day that he might be a guy that defensively you can put on different guys. They did start possessions on Kevin Durant, although I will say I'm always a little bit. I mean, we saw PJ Tucker pushing the absolute limits of physical defense in the postseason last year. Pete kind of a guy that kind of gets away with that because they're like, he's physical. We won't blow the whistle there. I'm not sure other players get away with the benefit of the doubt. Certainly, Shemi Ojeleye didn't tonight in his couple of possessions where he was trying to defend Kevin Durant. Wes Matthews did a decent job tonight. Like you said, it's no surprise that he's around here. But we've seen him take these types of matchups before. The one thing I will point out, and you mentioned it, you thought maybe they would try him on James Harden. We saw a couple of possessions. Middleton was on the perimeter in front of Harden. We discussed this a couple of nights ago. That's the matchup. Chris isn't. He can't stay in front of even James Harden right now. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out moving.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, normally Drew, you would
Yeah.
say, okay, put Drew on Harden, right? But if they have Kyrie in a game, somebody's, Drew can't guard both those guys, so you'd have to figure out what to do. I thought it was a little weird. Like it didn't seem like the Bucks were. I remember Wes doing it. Wes at one point shaded Harden to go right because obviously as a left-handed player, we know what he can do. I mean, famously, the old Eric Bledsoe defense, right, which was basically just concede him to go right so that he can't get to that left hand. I thought it was interesting. I was kind of like getting annoyed. I was like, I mean, fortunately, I mean, he started really slowly. What was he like, 1 for 8 or something, or 2 for 10 in the first half? It was a real struggle for Harden. Bucks were, playing physical, and the refs were not kind of falling for his antics. He's gotten much better as the season has worn on, but this felt much more like what we saw from him early in the season in terms of some of the struggles. Bounced back a bit in the third quarter, but yeah, I mean, I think Wes. I just remember a couple years ago, Wes had time defending Harden when he was in Houston when Wes's first stint with the Bucks. I thought, yeah, like I said, I thought Wara would start. I thought Wes would start, but I thought they would put Wes in to defend uh, 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 Harden, and then Chris. We've seen him obviously have to defend KD at times.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that they kind of flipped that and had Chris on Harden. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, I mean, Chris's defense at this point, like, I feel like Chris, especially in the regular season, is kind of in like cruise control defensively. Let's say, I would say Chris is not a good regular season defender at this point. Pretty mediocre. He definitely, I'd say, among the Bucks kind of regulars, gives up, let's just say, his fair share of blow-bys, and let's just say not the stoutest defense from him. But obviously, the team defense in general was really good on Harden, and it didn't really kind of hurt them too much tonight. And I thought Chris did a good enough job, obviously. So, but yeah, I think have to feel good again. Wes just continues to be this great story. First play of the game ends up being a Wes post up for an and one. Okay. Not what you necessarily expect. He had another play in the second half, I think it was, where he drove in and hit kind of like a mid-range step back as well. And hits a couple threes. He ends up with 12 points on 9 shots. I mean, again, 12 points, 9 shots, plus, what was he, plus 19, and KD was a minus 19. You really couldn't have asked for much more from Wes Matthews tonight. And again, I think, you want to be reasonable about this and not assume that he's just going to be able to, go in and make Kevin Durant have to work super, super hard. And he's going to, keep Kevin Durant down. I mean, tonight, KD had kind of a slow start and he still ends up with whatever it was, 27, 29 points on 19 shots. I mean, again, the guy's just really, really good. But, I think Wes just did a really nice job of kind of towing that line of physicality, getting some strips, forcing some turnovers, and just not making it too easy on KD. And that's, again, I think at the end of the day, like, that's kind of all you can do. And I think, when you look at the Nets tonight, the 3-point shooting, right? I mean, this was the story. I mean, this is why the Bucks had such an easy win tonight. They shoot 16 out of 45. Okay, 36%, right? Nothing great. But the Nets only take 27 threes and only make 6. You mentioned Patty Mills, obviously not doing his normal thing that we're used to. But KD was only 1 out of 3 from deep. Harden was just 1 out of 3 from deep. And again, I think this is what happens with the Nets, is they kind of just they play with, they get in these traps where they just sort of don't play with any pace. And then Harden and Durant in particular, they're obviously great one-on-one players, but especially with kind of, the lack of ideal depth right now. And, David Duke's out there, who's not a 3-point shooter. Cam Thomas can hit some jump shots, but Giannis was on him at times and was pretty much just like, knock yourself out, shoot threes. He was 1 out of 5. It just didn't feel like the Bucks or the Nets were really putting a lot of pressure on the Bucks and forcing them into rotations and forcing them to scramble. And I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, they just didn't even take many threes, right? And the Bucks, we know, typically give up tons of 3-point attempts. So, it was mentioned on the broadcast, they were only 5 or 6 out of 21 against Indiana earlier this week. So the Nets are one of these teams that, again, because of the way they play, they're very one-on-one oriented. And right now they don't have Joe Harris. He's been out for a while. they just don't have quite the same dynamism as a shooting team that maybe you would like them to have, given just some of the talent they have. But kudos to the Bucks defense. They didn't rely on just purely the Nets missing all their shots. They also actually kind of prevented them from from taking tons and tons of threes. And at the end of the day, wasn't like a big lockdown effort from the Bucks defensively. A 111 defensive rating, but a fair bit of that, the Nets kind of garbage time junk team came out there and cut into the lead a bit, as you alluded to. So overall, hey, you lit up the scoreboard with a makeshift lineup. The Bucks offense has actually been pretty, with the exception of like the second half against Toronto, the Bucks offense has certainly continued to do its job of late. And obviously when Chris and Giannis are doing what they do, and then you get these kind of step up efforts from Bobby, who's been doing it all year. But then, as you mentioned, Rodney Hood stepping up and hitting some shots, Jordan Nwora hitting some shots, and Wes Matthews hitting some shots. I mean, that's the recipe, obviously, right now with the lack of depth they have, and in particular with Drew and George Hill out.
Rodney Hood is a Mike Breen special. He played really well in the game against New York. So when Mike Breen's on the call, you can expect big things from Rodney Hood. That's what I've taken away from the early part of this season. You mentioned their offense, Brooklyn's offense, in the way that they were missing those threes. And when it did get a little bit stagnant and a little bit sluggish there and bogged up, I guess, whatever word you want to use, I was looking at some of those in the corner, and they were kind of looking at me if I don't have a Built Bar late in the afternoon, and I'm looking really sluggish as well. That's what those guys, David Duke, looked like he needed a Built Bar in the corner there. Hopefully he doesn't take one. It's like, anyway, whatever. Hopefully he doesn't have a Built while they play the Bucks next. So, a very legal product, beautiful product, delicious product, best tasting protein bar out on the market. There's no doubt about that. It's good for you. It's healthy for you, and it will help you hit your throw bar. It's a new year, so if you want to stick to your New Year's resolutions, you may as well be tasting protein bars, Built Bars for the first time, because they taste so good. You'll just want to get more and more. Over there at built.com, use the code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. That's built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order there at Built. Couple of stats from this game, and I was on Stathead, Frank, late in the second quarter. I was thinking to myself, how many Bucks players have had a 20-10 first half? Because Bobby Portis, 20 points and 9 rebounds, 1 rebound short, but he only needed a couple of rebounds for like the last 5 minutes, and he just wasn't able to get them. This was one of those stats where I was like, surely it would have been, as far as I could tell, the search engine was telling me, the 6th first half of 20-10 Milwaukee Bucks player history. Giannis had the first 5. Bobby would have joined the esteemed company of Giannis of having 20-10 in the first quarter, which would have been pretty crazy. And the other stat, 15 points in the third quarter. We saw him do this in the postseason over and over and over again, where he would just explode in a quarter and have these really hot stretches that helped the Bucks win a number of playoff games. That was the 6th quarter since the season where he's had at least 15 points in a period. And it's happened in big games. And I don't know if you want to classify tonight as a big game with all the players out. Maybe you don't. But it's really developed this need where he doesn't have to have a strong start to the game to finish strong, or he can go into halftime really struggling, come out of the half and have this really hot stretch. And the only other stat that the broadcast showed that I found kind of crazy, and I thought of you straight away, Frank, the Bucks now 22-0 when they lead through 3 quarters so far this season. And we know they had that comeback win on Christmas, but this was the theme that we spoke about a lot on the podcast through last year. The Bucks were just winning games and they're in front and they would go on and win the game. But 22-0 when they're leading through 3 quarters at the stat.
Yeah, and so what means that they're 4-15 when they're losing after 3 quarters. I guess that's the downside, right?
Don't worry about that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think just, to me, it's interesting. The second half was pretty performative, basically. Like, Chris, as you said, came out, hit a 3 off a Giannis kick out on I think it was the first possession. He gets a 4-point play then, maybe it was a couple possessions later. By the way, I was pissed because Durant, I think he had 4 fouls, got the benefit of a tie-up call on Giannis. And I think 2 or 3 times Giannis got tied up tonight, and when they showed the replay, it like looked like a clear foul on the Nets players. I think in that case, KD looked like he raked him across the arm before he tied him up. So I was like, hey, review that tie-up call. And again, I don't know if you could review it for a foul. I think you probably could. I was actually thinking like, hey, why don't you review that, because Durant had 4 fouls. So if Kevin Durant picks up his 5th foul, a couple minutes into the third quarter, I mean, that's actually like a big deal. Like they probably consider sitting him down at least at that point. Or you're just a foul away from him being fouled out entirely. Obviously, it ultimately didn't matter. Nick Claxton also, by the way, yes, I think it was I can't remember if it was Claxton or Kessler. I think maybe it was Kessler, but yeah, the Nets just we're tying up Giannis, we're blocking him. No, you're not. You're fouling him, just getting the benefit of the official. But to me, I think that really the key part of this game was the second quarter. We alluded to Giannis getting the foul trouble and having to sit down. I was a little worried about Darvin Ham being maybe a little too conservative, taking Giannis out, and is he going to just sit him the rest of for second quarter? And then that's the golden opportunity for the Nets to make a run, especially because Chris sat down for a fair bit of that period as well. But huge credit to obviously Bobby Portis first and foremost. He was the man of the first half. But I was looking at the lineup we had. I mean, I think there was that at some point there was Rodney Hood and Langston Galloway and Shemi Ojeleye, I think, were all on the floor together without Giannis or Chris. And it's like, that is not a lineup I'm betting on to carry me with Giannis and Chris on the bench. But Bucks were able to survive and not just kind of maintain a lead, but actually expand their lead, and they go up 60-49 heading into the halftime. So to me, that was sort of the biggest stretch of the game, was just the fact that the Bucks, Giannis picking up those fouls opens the door for the Nets to kind of wake up and maybe go on a run with the Bucks, showing their very stretched bench on the floor. But again, the fact that they were able to not just hang on, but expand that lead was huge, especially because Chris, even when Chris was in the game, I mean, he had 5 points and was generally really struggling in the first half. So that was, to me, the big focal kind of stretch of the game. And again, does it matter in the play for a playoff preview? No. But as we've been saying, I mean, like, this is a weird season. You love beating the Nets. That's a potential playoff rival. You've now got a 2-0 lead on them in the season series. So if it comes to like a head-to-head tiebreaker or something like that, you at least won't lose that head-to-head tiebreaker. And so, again, just picking up wins right now, especially with the COVID situation that it is. You have to go to Charlotte on Saturday, which is not an easy place to play, and do a back-to-back. If you lose tonight, you're staring down the barrel of a 4-game losing streak. And again, it's not like you're on the verge of tumbling out of the playoffs or being in the play-in, but it's a weird season, right? I mean, if God forbid you lost Giannis for a month later in the season or something like that, you want to be banking wins when you've got those chances now. And obviously to do it against a Nets team where both James Harden and Kevin Durant were available tonight, I mean, it's important. And like I said, I will grant you, Kane, this was a big win. This was an impressive win by regular season standards. Fist pump for you. Yes, I'm acknowledging it. And it was a fun one too, right? Because we got to see Giannis and Chris and Bobby, kind of the guys that we've been used to seeing deliver. They did kind of what was needed. But then we also got to see some peppered in kind of some more random contributions as well. And again, Wes Matthews is like my kind of personal favorite guy on this roster right now. We talked, in the preseason about George Hill coming back, and you try and go win a championship with George Hill back. Now you've got Wes back as well. I think it's just a really fun subplot just to see those guys back with the team. Wes in particular, not been on a roster for so long. I mean, how is he not on an NBA roster is kind of a, obvious question at this point. And again, you just hope he can maybe he doesn't shoot 43% from 3 the rest of the way, but just his defense and, just shot making and just the kind of just veteran kind of b-ball IQ stuff he brings to the floor has obviously just been a really really big addition, especially given just the uncertainty night tonight as far as who's going to be available. But hey, you know what? It's Friday night. The Bucks just beat the Nets again in convincing fashion. James Harden again did very little and looked frustrated. And Giannis got his 30+ points. Chris Middleton did his thing. Bobby Portis was a one. By the way, the two easiest attempts Bobby had tonight was his breakaway dunk that he missed, and then he had that, and I think it was early in the fourth quarter. I forget who. Someone gave him a shovel pass, which would have been just like an uncontested dunk or a layup, and he kind of fumbled it away. And I was just like, man, Bobby, 25 points and like the two easiest buckets he had tonight, he booted away. But he everything that wasn't easy, Bobby put away. He was a beast on the boards again. And I guess one other comment just on Bobby. We were talking in our thread, and Mitchell, our friend Mitchell, was asking like, how much of this is this like, is Bobby doing something different? Because I tweeted out he scored 12 points in the entire Nets series last year. He only played 58 minutes, was 6 out of 18. Obviously was a non-factor, only played in 4 of the 7 games. Tonight he's this huge factor. Obviously, again, it's regular season. The Bucks are missing Brook Lopez and a bunch of other guys. Is there anything fundamentally different this year versus last year in terms of Bobby and his playability against the Nets? And I would say I would say offensively he's been even better this year. And I think even throughout the playoffs last year, I mean, the Suns matchup was not an easy matchup for him either, right? If you're a big man defender who isn't like a great defender in pick and roll, and you have to go against Chris Paul and Devin Booker, that's really tough. And he managed to make a big impact in that Phoenix series, especially offensively, but he also had some moments defensively. So I think it'd be interesting to see if if the Bucks face the Nets in the playoffs. We've seen them kind of hedging really hard, at times even just straight up doubling on pick and rolls. We saw them do that tonight, and especially in the first half, Harden really struggled with it. Again, over a long series, can you just continually do that over and over and over again? I don't know. I mean, again, I don't think dropping Bobby is really the answer. So probably having some sort of combination of doubles, of switches, and then of shows and recover is probably what you'd have to do. But again, I think the upside is they're doing that all season now. They're practicing it a ton, and for the most part, they're kind of holding up. So have to feel good for Bobby Portis. Just the way this season is shaking out, I don't think it's an option for Bobby to not be a major factor in every playoff series the Bucks have. So shout out to Bobby. The season of Bobby Portis continues. The future mayor of Milwaukee, once again getting it done for us, and maybe getting a little measure of redemption after. I think Bobby's fully redeemed, to be clear, but against the Nets at least, reminding the Nets that yes, he will not be a non-factor if they have to play them again.
Yeah, he's been awesome all year, and Giannis just tweeted out a bunch of and the hashtag All-Star, whatever it is, so you can go on Giannis's Twitter, retweet Giannis in votes. Drew Holiday was one player, Chris Middleton was one player, and Bobby Portis player. So get those votes in for Bobby in himself for All-Star. Should. He's had a good season. I'm not sure he's going to get there season. There's no doubt about that. So we'll wrap it up. This is a fun one on the weekend. The Bucks beat the Nets. Always good to beat a fellow contender who's out on the floor, on the road, national TV. It was a good one. So we'll be back to start next week in the middle of this back-to-back set 2 games in Charlotte. So we'll be able to wrap up the first game, look ahead to the second one. For Frank and myself, have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll catch you next week.